Hey, everybody on this Thursday night. Thursday. Hey. Right? You turn the light on. So y'all see the moniker. Y'all see the thumbnail. Black men are tired of being taken for granted by the Democratic Party. Or they feel like they're being taken advantage of by the Democratic Party. So one of the biggest mistakes people make right now is to pretend like they don't understand why so many black men have become frustrated with the Democratic Party. Now, I think about 20% of you guys, 20% of you black men voted for Donald Trump. I understand the frustration completely because a lot of black men have spent years feeling politically invisible. At least that's what I'm told. I got into a conversation with somebody today, and that's what I was being told. Politically invisible outside of election cycles. Every 4 years, politicians suddenly rediscover the black man. They make emotional speeches. They bring celebrities around. They organize outreach campaigns. And they speak as if black men are one of the most urgent priorities in American politics. Then the election ends, and many black men go right back to feeling unheard, economically strained, culturally dismissed, and politically unimportant. And a lot of black men feel like they spent decades voting out of loyalty, I guess, while watching their material concerns either stagnate or deteriorate, right? Housing costs have become crushing in many cities. Wages for working class men have not kept up with the pace of the cost of living. I get that. Urban public schools continue to fail generation after generation of black people. And violence remains deeply embedded in too many neighborhoods. I get that. Fatherhood struggles, re-entry struggles, educational struggles, mental health struggles affecting black men rarely feel like politics prioritize them. They don't get prioritized. And many black men feel like their role in politics has been reduced to showing up on command every election season while their actual daily lives remain unstable and unchanged. And because of that frustration, some black men emotionally disconnect from the Democratic Party long before they politically disconnect from everything. Some men simply stop believing anybody's politics was genuinely speaking to their concerns. Okay. Others became attracted to anti-establishment politics because at least those spaces sounded emotionally honest about frustration, anger, masculinity, and alienation. Some drifted towards Trump and conservative politics, not necessarily because they believed Republicans had a deep structural commitment to black advancement, no, but because they wanted to reject an establishment that they felt had stopped listening to them, which was the Democratic Party. That emotional reaction is real, and Democrats need to stop pretending they do not understand why it happened. When people feel unheard long enough, they stop trusting the people who ignored them. When people feel taken advantage of or taken for granted for so long, they start looking elsewhere for validation, even if that validation ultimately leads them towards political decisions that may not actually protect their long-term interests. However, this is where the conversation becomes dangerous because frustration can make people emotionally reactive. And emotionally reactive people often lead them into short-term political thinking. So, listen to this.
Black Americans in general have given their vote to the Democratic Party, right? 90% of their vote. And for 60 years, the cities that those Democrats control have gotten progressively worse. And, rather than look at it and say, oh, these people took so long to realize, right, that these, they were being tricked or whatever, these people were lying, I thought to myself, you know what? Let's be happy that we're actually here right now because, at least people are now people are doing the math. Because young black men, I'm not really, the young black women haven't been convinced yet, but the young black men are actually leaving and the polls actually show it. I was actually taking a look at the 2024 Democratic, votes and, the election and how the votes went, especially for black men. And it wasn't looking so pretty. And what does the Democratic Party do, right? They don't go self-reflect and say, oh, we did this wrong. Maybe we lied here. We can come clean. Nah, they just panic, right? Because they know that, once the black vote and the black voters start shopping around, right? And especially black men start shopping around and saying, oh, maybe don't vote. Let's look at actually what we're voting for and what actually makes sense. Yeah, it's not looking too good for the Democratic Party. Because I would go as far as to say that without the black vote, or without the black male vote, or black vote in general, Democratic Party is really nothing, right? That's their main source of votes, right? Their whole political coalition depends on the black vote, basically. And I'm actually happy to say that, young black men, especially young black men, right? I think the older ones are far too gone, right? They're too caught up in the system, right? Because for me, you would like to think, right, after 60 years of the same shit, that people would actually change their minds, right? Which actually brings up another crazy point to me, because I think it's crazy that people just vote like based on one party. Oh, I'll never ever switch from that party. Nah, you're supposed to, like, the fact that people don't actually look at the policies that politician is pushing and saying, okay, maybe I should vote for this, instead of just saying, yo, Democrat, I'm gonna vote for that. That's just crazy to me. But hey, this is the world we live in. People are very, very loyal, and human beings really don't like change. But if you actually look at it, the most dangerous cities are run by Democrats, right? The most dangerous cities are run by Democrats. And they have been for decades. Don't get it twisted. The schools failing these children, especially black children, right? We know the illiterate rate for black children. They're mostly in Democratic cities. Now people are asking the questions, well, why are black neighborhoods still struggling the same way they've been struggling for 60 years, even though we've been voting for y'all? Why is every single solution, does it require us to be more dependent on the system instead of actually giving us the actual freedom that y'all promised? Those are the real questions. But yeah, to say the least, I would say in terms of the black vote, the Democratic Party might be cooked for the next 10 to 15 years.
In my personal opinion, I felt that a very large number of African-American men shifted towards Trump within the last 4 years. They all are switching towards Trump. They're beginning to wake up, quote unquote, and realize that the Democratic Party is not for them, is not helping them, and is capitalizing off of them. They're capitalizing off of them. Plain and simple. A lot of things that she said made sense. I mean, I think we all jumped on the bandwagon because Obama was a black man and we wanted a black president. I get it. I voted for him.
The reason black men are leaving the Democrat Party is because the Democrat Party is pro-migrant, LGBTQ, and feminist ideology. They're also realizing the Democratic Party is anti-family and marriage, anti-men, especially masculine men, and they're starting to realize through the consumption of independent media that they're social and cultural conservatives, and that's starting to bleed into their political lives,
For
too.
myself, the reason I think the Democratic Party and Mr. Biden, President Biden, is losing black votes is they only care about black people every 4 years. They come into our neighborhoods and say, we're going to make stuff better. We're going to do this, do this, do this. And then finally, us black people are like, man, other than my ability to dunk a basketball, all my neighborhoods are still the same. Our schools are still the same. And that's why I think black people are leaving disappointed in the Democratic Party, because I ain't gonna lie, I voted Democratic every time just because I thought it was gonna help black people and poor people. Because black people and poor white people, they're in the same boat. And like, I didn't care who the president was, I'm not gonna lie, but I only voted Republican one time in my life, and that was for John Kasich, and I didn't even know he couldn't win. But then I'm starting to look like, man, I understand why black people are leaving, want to vote for somebody else, because every 4 years they come into our neighborhoods and say, man, we're gonna make things better for you.
Oh, I think that's true, and I'll let you go. I do want to point out, though, that poor black folks have been voting for Democrats for 2 generations, not as much progress as you want. Poor white folks have been voting for Republicans in Appalachia and other places for 3 generations or 4, and not that much progress. So there's a poor people problem with both parties. But
I think what you highlighted might be a reason why some black voters stay home. But if we're asking why are certain black voters switching from Democrat to Republican, I don't think they're switching to Trump or to other Republicans because they think those Republicans are going to actually make change. I think those voters are switching for other reasons, just because they actually don't like the message that Democrats are sending to them as black people, and especially as young black people. Because again, this trend is not happening throughout black America. It's confined basically to black men under 30.
I would argue that young men are not going to the Republican Party. What I would argue is that they're leaving the Democratic Party, because if you go to the DNC, the Democratic Party's website, there's a section that says who we serve. Click on it. And it says, these are the constituents in America that we serve, that we advocate for. And it lists 16 demographic groups ranging from Asians and Pacific Islanders, the disabled, seniors, Black Americans, veterans. It goes through all of these groups. And I tried to add it up, and I think it adds up to 76% of the US population. But similar to kind of the DEI apparatus on campus now, or on university campuses, when you're purposely advocating and trying to advantage 76% of the population, you're not advantaging 76% of the population or advocating for them. You're discriminating against the 24%. And that 24% are squarely one group. It's young men. And if you look at the Democratic National Convention, it was a parade of demographic groups, but not one mentioned the group that has fallen furthest, fastest in the United States, and that's young men.
Of Chicago, this is directed at you. In a speech Biden made a while back, he said that the majority in America soon will be Latino. He didn't say black. He didn't say Asian or white or anything. He said Latino. That's why millions and millions of lighter-skinned Latino illegal aliens are being allowed in. And many of them are being sent to black communities so they can slowly start to replace y'all. You need to wake up, man. I'm from Texas. I'm from a border town. I have relatives who are border patrol and who are in law enforcement. They were being given $5,000 upon entry into this country. And as soon as they got to their destination and settled in, they were being given $1,200 a month to $1,400 a month, plus free food stamps, free housing, free medical, free dental, and they even get free college. You can research it. They get free college, illegal aliens, but you get nothing. You get nothing. You need to wake up, man. Stop voting for the Democrats. In some cases, it's already too late. I'm good. I'm Latino, man. I don't have to worry about being replaced. I'm Latino. But you have to wake up. In some cases, it's already too late. Millions of these people will never leave, okay? They will never leave, and the Democrats don't need your vote anymore. They don't need your vote anymore, man. They used you for your vote, and they already got millions of new voters, man, and they don't need you anymore. And I'm telling you, man, you better wake up. You better stop voting Democrat. You better wake up. Latinos for Trump, 2020.
I don't want them there. Take them someplace else or send them back to Venezuela. I don't care where they go. This is wrong. You got 73% of the people homeless in this city are black people. What have you done for them? What are you doing for the thousands of black children who are not in school? Nothing.
We have citizens in this city that have been on the waiting list for affordable housing for years, and migrants have been bumped in front of them.
Look how much African American communities have suffered under Democratic control.
This is an attack on the black community by the Democratic Party.
As black people who have been hurt continuously by the city and country it loves, it ain't our responsibility to take care of everybody else.
It is time for us as black people to stop voting party. It is time for us to stop voting color. It is time for us to start voting our self-interest.
Tonight, the border crisis surging. Officials telling NBC News record.
Okay, we got this.
Below.
Well, see, I understand. I think some black men have become so frustrated with the Democratic Party that they started treating political disappointment and political equivalence as if they're the same thing. The Republican Party and the Democratic Party are not the same thing. And then not at all. A party disappointing you does not automatically mean the opposing party, the opposite party, was ever structurally designed to advance your interest long term. That distinction matters because I think some Black men are reacting emotionally to very real frustrations without fully thinking through the institutional consequences of empowering a political movement that has historically opposed many of the mechanisms Black Americans relied upon to gain access, leverage, and protection in the first place. Why Black men started moving away from the Democratic Party. I think Democrats became too comfortable with Black political loyalty. And once any political party believes your support is automatic, accountability begins to disappear. When politicians believe they no longer have to truly compete for your vote, they stop treating your frustrations as politically urgent. Over time, many Black men started feeling as though the Democratic Party expected loyalty without maintaining the same level of urgency about delivering visible material improvements to the working class Black communities. A lot of Black men feel like they've spent decades hearing promises while watching too many conditions inside their communities remain unstable. And I get that. Housing costs exploded in major cities. Wages for working class men stagnated while the cost of living has risen. Of course, stable labor opportunities are disappeared in many areas. Urban public schools continue to fail our children generation after generation, despite decades of reform, language and bills and billions of dollars spent. I get that. Violence remains deeply embedded in our communities, while political leaders seem more focused on optics and messaging than outcomes people actually can feel in their daily lives. And I get that too. And after a while, many Black men started asking difficult questions. After generations of overwhelming political loyalty, where is the measurable transformation in the average working class Black man's life? That question matters because a lot of Black men no longer feel like loyalty has produced enough material return. Many feel like Black men became politically dependable, but economically stagnant. You feel like they're called essentially during election time, but treated as politically inconvenient once that governing actually begins for the people. Part of that frustration also comes from the perception that the Democratic coalition often appears far more organized, energized, and responsive towards other constituencies rather than the Black male concerned specifically. A lot of Black men look at the amount of political urgency directed towards the LGBT community, the LGB community, the immigration community, gender identity debates, and other coalition priorities. And they ask themselves why it often feels like everybody else's struggles generate immediate national attention and mobilization, while issues that they have remain episodic, symbolic, or secondary. Now, whether every one of those perceptions is completely fair in every individual case is not really the point. Politics is heavily shaped by perception, and many Black men genuinely feel politically deprioritized inside a coalition they help sustain for generations at a time. And I get that. The immigration issue intensified some of these frustrations dramatically in certain cities because many working class Black residents watch local governments rapidly mobilize emergency housing, public funding, healthcare, access shelters, and political attention for newly arriving migrant populations, while longstanding Black neighborhoods spent decades being told resources were limited and budgets were tight and meaningful intervention was too expensive or politically unrealistic. I get that. You hear about they gave the immigrants housing. They gave all these immigrants places to stay and food and money and all that. I hear all that. We hear all that. But that's not the federal government. That's not the federal government's job to give illegal immigrants stuff. That's the state governments that are giving illegal immigrants things, not the federal government, not the federal Democratic Party. That's illegal for the federal Democratic Party to help illegal aliens. It's illegal to give them housing. It's illegal for them to get Medicaid. It's illegal on a federal level. So it's not the federal people giving up those kind of things. It's the state that are giving those things to illegal immigrants. Those are individual budgets. That's individual money coming from the states, not the federal government. Okay. And I get it. They see our community struggling with homelessness, failing schools, violence, unemployment, addiction, and economic neglect for decades. And then suddenly watching the government system move with all of this speed and urgency for newer populations. Whether policymakers intended it this way or not, many Black men interpreted that contrast as confirming that they had become politically secondary inside the modern day Democratic Party. But at the same time, many Black men also began feeling culturally disconnected from parts of the modern progressive politics too. A lot of working class Black men still believe deeply in ideas like discipline and accountability, fatherhood, self-reliance, entrepreneurship. I get that structure, public safety. I get that. Many feel like modern politics or the political discourse increasingly talks around Black men instead of directly to them. They feel like traditional masculinity is often treated as inherently suspect or problematic, rather than understanding the economic and social instability shaping male frustration in the first place. So when men feel culturally dismissed while simultaneously struggling economically, resentment builds quickly in the Black community. So let me hear this. Here we go.
I'm not quite understanding. Now, if somebody's here, that's against the law. What are they asking y'all to do, to break the law? Ramirez, you got Black people in that district. When you gonna ever stand up for them? They living in poverty, poor education. What are you saying? You can't even look me in my face. What are you saying? You don't care about them. And here go 8 Black faces. We the majority, and you sitting here talking about a small majority, a small voting bloc. What are you saying? Forget the biggest voting bloc that y'all supposed to represent? And listen to me, my biggest threat is not ICE. My biggest threat is the local police, the sheriff, the state troopers. It wasn't long ago that the state troopers rolled the boy down on the ATV and shot him dead. Which one of y'all stood up for us then? Kim Worthy. Always overcharging. In fact, she got an interrogating unit that says after 5, 10, 30 years, oh, we made a mistake, let them go. Y'all don't say a one ugly word about that. So what are we doing here? Something that I'm not quite understanding.
Black people vote for Democratic administrations in Congress. Well, that's pretty easy because we're pretty smart. We vote our interests. All the rest of the stuff we don't care about. Our interest is staying employed and being able to take care of our families. It turns out that Republicans, that is Republican presidents, over the last 60 years have averaged 1 recession per 4-year term. In the last 60 years, Democratic administrations have only had 1 recession. That was about 50 years ago. So, since we're the first to get laid off in the recession and the recession hits us harder than anybody else, we vote for Democrats because we need a stable economy.
This comment is so funny to me because of the context under which it was commented. Yeah, Black people vote Democrat. Not all Black people identify as Democrat, but let's say in the last election, 2020, 92% of Black voters voted for Biden, 8% voted for Trump. And when you look at the demographics of how Black people identify, around 75% of them identify as Democrat, 15% around identify as independent, and around less than 10% identify as Republican. The thing about Black people is that Black people are generally pragmatic. While nobody's hype about the Democrat Party, people understand our options in a 2-party system. And the context under which you're commenting this is one where the Republicans just took away affirmative action. It's like, yeah, the Democrats aren't doing anything, but the other party in the two-party option is an active villain. It's like if you went into a restaurant and they only had two options on the menu, stale biscuits and used condoms. You probably eat the biscuit unless you're in that rare 8%.
Democrats cave into Trump and to MAGA tells us one really important thing, that we blacks can't depend on the Democrats. We can't let them lead our struggle. It's time for us, black voters, to take control of the Democratic Party. Because without us, the Democratic Party is weak, but with us leading the way, it can be strong enough to help us close the disparities and the inequities that our community continues to face. But that requires fighters and warriors, not politicians who fold every time Trump raises his voice. You see, we and our ancestors, we have fought men like Trump for 4 centuries. We've stood against them through slavery, Jim Crow, systemic racism, sharecropping, segregation, convict leasing, and so much more. So that fight is in our DNA. But many white liberals, they don't have that history. They've never struggled a day in their lives. They don't carry the legacy of resistance that we do. So why would we let them who've never lived out that kind of struggle control our struggle? They can help us. We need their help, but they cannot lead us. So that's why I created something called impact voting. Impact voting is about using our collective power to take charge of the Democratic Party. It's not about this foolishness of voting the couch and sitting out elections and all of that craziness. That's what has us in the mess we're in today. No, it's about voting impactfully, thoughtfully, and voting overwhelmingly. And it's also about voting for the right people we choose from our community. Because when we vote overwhelmingly, thoughtfully, impactfully for the right hand-picked people, we decide who gets elected. We decide which policies get passed. And we can stop anti-black policies like Project 2025.
Wow. Well, see, social media accelerated this frustration that black men have exponentially, dramatically. The manosphere, anti-establishment influencers, hyper-masculinity, political branding, and reactionary online spaces all recognize some Democrats largely underestimated, something that Democrats should have recognized. Many black men were emotionally exhausted and looking for someone who at least sounded like they understood their anger, and they found it in Donald Trump. Those spaces validated frustration in a way establishment politics often do not. They told of the frustration that men struggled with, that their struggle matters, that they were not weak for feeling disillusioned, and that their anger was justified. Now, whether those spaces offered productive long-term solutions is a completely different conversation, right? But emotional validation is powerful, especially when people feel ignored elsewhere. So the Democratic Party underestimated how emotionally detached many black men had become. And by the time they recognized that problem, a lot of frustration had already hardened into political distrust. To this day, still validating frustration does not mean every political conclusion people reach afterward is wise or strategically sound. That is the distinction I think people keep avoiding, because some black men became so angry at the Democrats that they stopped critically examining whether the alternative political movement, the Republican Party, actually had a meaningful long-term place for them beyond temporary emotional usefulness. Why many black voters moved away from the Republican Party in the first place? I think one of the biggest mistakes happening right now is that some black men are looking at their frustration with Democrats in isolation without reconnecting it to a larger historical reason many black Americans moved away from the Republican Party in the first place. That shift did not happen because Democrats were perfect. It happened because generation after generation of Black Americans concluded that however frustrating Democrats could be, the modern Republican Party increasingly represented a political movement that was either openly hostile to us, structurally indifferent to us, or culturally dismissive towards Black political advancement and Black institutional protection. And I think some younger Black men, especially online, are becoming so emotionally frustrated with Democrats that they're starting to lose that historical memory of why we left the Republican Party in the first place. Or maybe they just don't know. Because what many Black Americans are seeing from today's Republican Party is not simply ordinary conservatism anymore. They're seeing a much broader institutional project aimed at rolling back and weakening or dismantling many of the mechanisms us Black Americans historically depended on to protect ourselves from unequal power structures in the first place. That is why so many Black Americans increasingly view the modern day Republican Party as an existential political threat. Not because Republicans disagree with Democrats on taxes, not because conservatives are automatically racist, not because Black people are supposedly too blind and worship the Democrats forever. The existential concern comes from the growing belief that the current Republican Party, hold on. My goofy granddaughter. Not because conservatives are automatically racist. That's not it. Not because Black people are supposed to blindly worship the Democrats, like I said. This existential concern comes from the growing belief that the current Republican Party is actively attempting to shrink Black political leverage across multiple institutions, multiple states at the exact same time. What happened when the Supreme Court got rid of the Voting Rights Act? The second part, the second section, immediately across the South, they started trying to eliminate Black power, Black voting power. Why would that be an immediate thing that you all would get rid of? Black voting power, unless it was an existential threat to us. Black Americans are watching this aggressively. Attacks on DEI. Most of y'all don't even know what DEI means. You think you know. You done heard TikTok people tell you what it is. But you need to go and dig into your history. Because some of y'all have goofy ideas about what DEI is. I think I explained that to somebody very well one time about a spotlighted Black room, a room full of candidates. And the regular perusal of candidates only hits a couple people. But you turn on a DEI light and it hits all the people. And you see all of the people that you have choices about. But that's neither here nor there. Some of y'all don't know what DEI means. So we have seen them attack DEI across government agencies, universities, and corporations. We're watching this affirmative action pieces get dismantled after generations and generations in which Black Americans fought simply to gain access to institutions that had historically excluded us outright. We were excluded from these things outright. That's why the Civil Rights Act 64, 65, and 68 were so important. That's why DEI was so important. That's why affirmative action was so important. We watch as the Voting Rights Act protections get weakened while states push stricter and stricter voting rights protections, weakening everything, while states push protection for Black voters into the corner. and suppress our vote in Black communities. We see this happening in real time. And then people want to have a conversation about being a Black conservative, about being for Trump. I don't think so. Okay? I don't think so. We're watching conversations about systematic racism increasingly treated as illegitimate. No, there ain't no racism. There ain't no systematic racism. It ain't no such thing as that no more. Treat systematic racism as illegitimate or divisive or anti-American. We are watching Black history itself become a political battlefield where discussions about slavery and segregation, discrimination, and racial inequality are increasingly reframed, restricted, and softened or attacked as ideologically indoctrination. And many Black Americans are going along with that stuff because you don't know your history. Trump in his era is dismantling those things. That's why voting Republican cannot be an option. Okay? Many Black Americans have to ask them the simple questions. What exactly happens to Black political leverage in a country where race-conscious protections disappear? Things like the Voting Rights Act, 64, 65, and 68, DEI, affirmative. What exactly happens to Black political leverage in a country where race-conscious protections disappear? Diversity infrastructure disappears. Civil rights enforcements get weakened or disappear. Voting protections shrink, and historical inequality itself is no longer supposed to be openly discussed. A lot of you guys say racism ain't there no more. This is some of y'all are an existential threat. And this is the existential fear. Because Black Americans understand, most of us that are over the age of 60, we understand something from history that many emotionally frustrated people may not fully appreciate right now, especially you young people. Whenever Black institutional protections get weakened in America, the consequences never remain theoretical for long. The consequences never remain theoretical. They show up in the schools. They show up in money, wages. They show up in housing access. They show up in healthcare access. They show up in political representations. They show up in criminal justice outcomes. They show up in economic mobility. They show up in whether Black communities possess enough institutional leverage to defend themselves at all. And what makes many Black Americans especially uneasy about today's Republican Party is that these changes are not happening in isolation. They don't happen in isolation. They are happening simultaneously across courts, educational systems, federal agencies, labor structures, diversity programs, voting systems, public discourse, all at one time. Everything Black is being attacked in this administration. That pattern matters because many Black Americans do not view this simply as policy disagreement anymore. They increasingly view it as retrenchment. They see a political movement attempting to permanently reshape the country into one where race-conscious remedies, federal interventions, civil rights enforcements, and Black institutional advocacy becomes weaker, less legitimate, less protected, and eventually politically impossible altogether. And some people, some of you Black people, some of you young Black people don't know your history, don't understand what's going on and what's happening. I had somebody tell me today, the Democratic Party ain't did nothing for Black people. It's frustrating talking to some of y'all. It's frustrating. It's very frustrating when we see Black protections being dismantled daily by this administration. Okay. And I understand, hopefully, because you are frustrated, that this frustration does not automatically translate into trust for Republicans. A lot of Black men are angry. I get that. And much of that anger is understandable. I get that too. Democrats absolutely became too comfortable. They absolutely relied too heavily on symbolic politics, while many working class Black people continue to struggle economically and socially. I get all of that, but I think some Black men are becoming so emotionally reactive to those frustrations that they are drifting into dangerously short-term political thinking. Some men are looking at politics through the lens of immediate emotional rebellion instead of long-term institutional consequences. They're reacting to disappointment in the present without fully thinking through what happens if the larger structural protections like the Civil Rights Act, DEI, affirmative action, those things, those protections that we put into place when we were younger, those things that we put into place when we were younger as young Black adults, what that we did, that previous generations fought for, are permanently weakened over time. Okay. And I think that is one of the biggest dangers in this moment. Okay. Because the modern Republican movement is not simply competing for votes anymore. They're not competing for your votes. They don't want your votes. According to them, it is an aggressively reshaping of the courts, agencies, educational systems, civil rights frameworks, labor structures, and federal authority in ways many Black Americans could permanently reduce Black political leverage for decades if it's not stopped. That is why many Black Americans ultimately conclude that whatever frustrations that we may have with the Democrats, the Republican Party still cannot become a safe long-term political option for Black communities as a whole, specifically the Black men. Not because Democrats are perfect. We're not saying they're perfect. Not because Black people owe Democrats unconditional loyalty. I'm not saying that. But because many Black Americans believe the modern Republican project increasingly threatens the very institutional protections, political mechanisms, and structural leverage we Black Americans relied upon to survive and advance in the first place. The seashore, the car that you're riding in was put together through the Civil Rights Act, the DEI, and the affirmative action. The car that these young Black people are riding in, we put it together so you could ride safely. Now you're telling people, now you're telling the world, oh, we don't need DEI no more. We don't need affirmative action no more. We don't need those civil rights things no more. Y'all, I posit you need to go back and read your history as to why we still needed those things, why those protections were needed. Okay. The minute the Supreme Court said, knock down that Section 2 Voting Rights Act, Southern states moved to eliminate Black representation. Right? That right there should have told you that they were against anything related to the Black progressive agenda. That this specific Republican Party was against the Black progress. This is short-term thinking, and people fall into this short-term trap. I think some Black men started approaching politics emotionally instead of strategically. Emotionally. Gimme, what y'all gonna give me? Y'all Democrats ain't giving me nothing for my vote. You need to give me something for my vote. Many of y'all begin to think in terms of punishment and rebellion rather than long-term institutional consequences. Some of y'all started saying Democrats needed to learn a lesson. earn my vote. Others believe that sitting out elections or drifting towards Trump would somehow force Democrats to finally take black voters seriously again. The problem is that the politics do not function like emotional therapy, okay? Politics function through organized power, institutional influence, coalition building, judicial appointments, agency control, legislation, and long-term policy infrastructure. Power does not disappear when people disengage politically. It transfers to groups that remain highly organized and highly motivated not to give us what we want. That is why short-term emotional thinking becomes dangerous. Supreme Court appointments last for decades. Federal judges shape policy outcomes for generations at a time. Education policy, labor policy, voting rights enforcements, housing protections, and healthcare access all extend far beyond one election cycle. A 4-year emotional reaction can create 40 years of structural consequences. Look what happened when we wasn't paying attention, us black folk. They got to the DEI. They got to the affirmative action. They got to the Voting Rights Act. Historically, black Americans suffered the most whenever organized political leverage got weaker. That is simply the historical pattern. Whenever black political influence became fragmented, disengaged, or structurally weakened, the consequences arrived quick and fast and reduced our protections, reduced access, weaker enforcement, diminished institutional representation. I'm not saying black men should blindly support Democrats regardless of performance. Democrats absolutely deserve criticism in many areas. However, there's a major difference between strategically pressuring the Democrats, excuse me, strategically pressuring the Democrats for better outcomes and emotionally disengaging while another political movement aggressively reshapes institutions in ways that may permanently reduce black leverage for decades. That is not strategic rebellion. That is political surrender disguised as independence. I don't care how mad you are as a Democrat, Democratic male, female, whatever. Republican Party has never been an option. That is not an option. What black men are not doing right and how to make Democrats represent them better. Let's see. We're going to turn this conversation around because if we're going to be honest about where Democrats have failed black men, then we also need to be honest about where many black men are failing themselves politically. A lot of black men are frustrated. Much of that frustration is justified. However, too many men have turned frustration into emotional withdrawal instead of organized political leverage. They complain online. They vent in the barbershop. They repost clips about betrayal and talk about endlessly about how Democrats take them for granted. They don't care about our vote. They don't care about us. But then many of those same men completely disappear from the actual places where political power is built and maintained. Too many black men approach politics like spectators instead of participants. They wait for the Democratic Party to magically wake up and prioritize them without applying sustained pressure in between elections. You can't just, oh, I'm standing here. You want me to vote for you? Oh, you ain't did nothing for me. What have you done? What have you done to make the Democratic Party better? What have you helped to make the Democratic Party do your bidding? Okay. They treat politics emotionally instead of transactionally. They vote every 4 years, disappear politically the rest of the time, and then act shocked when the loudest and most organized groups inside our coalition receive the most attention. Y'all need to start organizing and shouting out like the LGBTQ community do, like the other groups do. Why y'all don't say nothing about what y'all need? Why don't y'all be louder with what y'all need? Not abandon the Democratic Party. Figure out how the Democratic Party can work for you. Okay? You just sitting around waiting for them to ask you what you want. That's not how political power works. Politicians respond to organized pressure, organized money, organized turnout, organized advocacy, and disruption. They respond to groups that consistently show up, consistently demand things, consistently apply leverage, and consistently make themselves impossible to ignore. Right now, Black men are some of the most politically reliable voters in the United States, but they're also among the least organized when it comes to sustained institutional pressure inside the Democratic Party. They don't never let themselves be known about nothing. They want to sit back and want you to court them. No, you need to come out and ask for stuff. That combination is a disaster strategically, because predictable loyalty without organized accountability creates complacency. That is part of why Democrats became too comfortable in the first place. A lot of Black men have essentially adopted emotional disengagement as a protest. Instead of saying to the Democratic Party, we need X, Y, and Z as a group. This is what we need. We need to organize and say we need this as a Black man group. Y'all need to get this for us and do what y'all need to do for us. Okay? Y'all believe checking out politically, threatening to vote for Donald Trump, drift towards that group goofy party, or publicly announce disappointment somehow creates leverage automatically. In reality, emotional withdrawal usually weakens leverage because politics rewards participation, not the silence that y'all want to give them. If Black men truly want Democrats to represent them better, then Black men need to stop waiting for national politicians to save them and start building organized power from the ground up. From the ground up. That means getting deeply involved in local politics where real day-to-day decisions are actually made. School boards decide educational priorities. Y'all worried about Black men getting educated? Black boys getting educated? Start joining some of the school boards. City councils decide housing priorities. You want to get rid of the Section 8 or get rid of the projects in your neighborhood? Start joining city council boards. County commissions shape local economic investment. State legislatures influence criminal justice policy, infrastructure spending, labor projects, educational fund. Get involved. Those local offices affect Black communities more directly and more consistently than a presidential speech or the federal level ever will. But y'all blaming the Democrats for you not getting involved in your local politics, your local school, your local city councils, county commissions, and all that. Get involved with those things. Don't just sit there and expect us as Democrats to come up to you and say, hey, Black man, what do you want? No, you need to organize as Black men and figure out become the loudest group and say, we want X, Y, and Z. Because all I hear is, oh, well, we running away from the Democratic Party because they ain't doing nothing for us. What you doing for the Democratic Party to make them do stuff for you? What's going on? Black men need to start running for those offices in larger numbers. Those offices, they need to start showing up consistently at local meetings, budget hearings, zoning discussion, policy forums. They need to start building coalitions around specific demands tied directly to Black male economic outcomes instead of waiting for political parties to voluntarily prioritize them out of moral obligation. Politics is not morality. Stop it. Politics is organized interests competing for influence. And they try to figure out, well, why y'all doing so much for the gay community? Why y'all doing so much for the women? Why y'all doing so much for the black? Because y'all over there in the corner scared to open y'all mouth and say y'all want X, Y, and Z as Black men and organize and make sure they hear you. What's going on? I don't understand why the Republicans would even be an option for Democratic men. Okay. Black men need stronger donor networks, political action committees, advocacy organization, policy groups focus specifically on Black male outcomes. Every major interest group in America that successfully shapes policy has organized financial leverage behind it, which means you black men need to get organized and get some money behind your talking points. Corporations do it. Labor groups do it. Ideological activists do it. Immigrant advocacy groups do it. Black men have spending power, cultural influence, labor influence, voting influence, but very little of it has been consistently converted into a coordinated effort or institutional power. What's going on? Y'all ain't helping me. Y'all not doing nothing for the black man. What y'all doing to get yourselves out there for the Democratic Party to advocate for you? Have y'all put any money together, any groups together, prioritize anything, got a group together and say, we want these things as black men and we're going to run on this. We're going to push the Democratic Party to where they need to be in order to help black groups? Black women do it all the time. Why y'all black men can't do it? Black men also need to stop outsourcing political leadership entirely to their celebrity people, influencers, and national personality. A lot of political conversations online are emotionally satisfying but strategically hollow. All y'all got y'all news. Most y'all black men got your news and your information from online, from goofy goofies who didn't even know what they was talking about, who convinced you that Trump was good for the black community. How the hell is Trump good for the black community and everything else that we done put into place 60 years, 50 years, 40 years down the line? He done tried to dismantle since he been in the office. How is he anywhere near good enough for the black people? How? Okay. Real power is built through precinct organizing, coalition building, voter turnout operations, fundraising too. You got a candidate, you want to recruit somebody, legislative pressure, all of these things is how you push the Democratic Party to what you want. That work is boring compared to viral political content, ain't it? But that's how actual policy gets shaped. That's how it gets shaped. Another major problem is that many black men disengage from primaries, even though primaries are where the real ideological direction of parties get determined. By the time the general election arrives, many of those most important decisions about candidates, messaging, and priorities have already been made. If black men want stronger representation inside the Democratic Party coalition, then they need to become more aggressive participants in the candidate selection process itself. And let me say something else clearly, because I think this part matters too. Black men also need to stop expecting unconditional respect from political systems while remaining politically fragmented themselves. Respect in politics is usually tied to leverage, and leverage comes from consistency, organization, turnout funding, visibility, and disruption when necessary. Groups that consistently demonstrate organized power receive political attention because politicians fear losing them. You need to push the Democratic Party to do what you want them to do. That is why emotional detachment from you black men is not a long-term strategy. It's not a long-term strategy that's going to work. A lot of black men think withholding support automatically creates leverage, but with withholding support without building an organized alternative often creates just political irrelevance. There's a major difference between strategic negotiation and passive withdrawal. One creates influence, the other creates silence.
So that's how we take real power. That's how we take control. So if you want to understand exactly how voting works and how we build that power, watch my latest YouTube video on the Defiant Lawyers. Because the next election, folks, it's not about saving the Democratic Party. It's not about the Democratic Party saving us. It's about us controlling the Democratic Party with impact voting. And as always, stay woke.
Okay, Tad, let's have a conversation. You consider yourself a Republican, right? A member of the grand old party? But did you know that Democrats in the 1800s were the conservatives of their day? True story. You see, while terms like Democrat or Republican have switched hands over time, their political ideologies have stayed the same. So let's get a better understanding of what a conservative was in the 1800s. Pause to read, but for some reason I know you won't. Here's what conservatives believed in. Here are the things that benefited conservatives. Conservatives are often opposed to any type of rapid change in society that included freeing the slaves. They were in favor of keeping things as they were. While the progressives and liberals of the day were in favor of ending the institution of chattel slavery in America. And just so we're clear, conservatives are opposed to what? Okay. Just making sure we're on the same page here. So when you say things like it's the Democrats who kept them enslaved, you're partially correct. It's conservatism that fought against ending enslavement. And if you don't believe that, do you remember the Whig Party? They were the conservative party of the day. Matter of fact, during the 1860s and 70s, they were the conservative party. But eventually, they were folded into the Democratic Party, making them the party of conservatism in America. So, the next time you say something like, the Democrats were the one who fought to keep black people enslaved, use proper context and say the conservatives were the ones who fought to keep black people enslaved, while the liberals and progressives fought to end the institution of slavery. Have a good day, Tad.
Realm. What does that say? One thing that I've always been taught is that change does not come in comfortability. I'm gonna say it again, and I'm gonna check to see if this thing is on so the people in the back can hear. Change does not come in comfortability. Does that mean to run to the right and just give them your vote out of frustration from the left? No, what I'm saying is hold value in your vote. Do not allow the public media or anybody for that matter to gaslight you into voting left, because if you don't, you are either less black or you don't value the rights that you currently have.
Black Americans vote Democrat. Is it their choice, or were we born to vote blue no matter who?
You ever heard this saying before? You blacks just need to get off the plantation. Stop voting Democrat. They don't care anything about you. Do you know why black people mostly vote Democrat? I'll tell you. Let's just agree that it's just racist people everywhere. Both sides, everywhere, both ends of the spectrum. But why is it that the ones that are blatantly racist, that blatantly fly the Confederate flag, that blatantly say racist rhetoric online and also in person and on all these videos, you ask them what political party they belong to, 9 times out of 10, they're gonna say they are Republican. Matter of fact, they're gonna say it like this: I'm Republican, buddy. So stop asking that why are black people mostly Democrat. Why not ask the better question? Is why do so many blatantly outward racist people feel comfortable being Republican?
Yes.
Man, why are you voting Democrat? Because they're better for the economy, and I care about the economy. Given the fact that, history has its own gruesome, background and whatnot, and we both despise the Ku Klux Klan, correct? Yes. But, the Democratic Party is the one who's, right? When? I got right now. Hold on, I'm about to tell you right now. Started back in 1865. Okay. Are you aware what happened and where primarily the Ku Klux Klan was operating? Tennessee. And the South, right? Yeah, I would consider that the South. So those Southern KKK folks were voting for Democrats, right? Okay. So can you tell me why, after the passage of the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, they immediately started voting for Republicans? What party started it, though? That's not what I'm asking you. What you're saying is true. So there's a reason why in the 1960s they started voting for Republicans. And the reason why is because they were mad at Democrats for passing the Civil Rights Act. So the same people put those Democrats in office, started putting Republicans into office to fulfill their agenda because they were mad at the passage of the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act. So the Democrats that you are mad at for starting the KKK are the Republicans of today. But it's safe to say the Democratic Party is the birthplace of the KKK. Who gives a shit? Who gives a shit? Because the descendants of those people are the ones that the Republican Party is today. Those people are Republicans.
See, I think many black men would be shocked by how quickly Democratic priorities would shift if black men became one of the most organized, policy-focused, institutionally active blocs in the Democratic coalition instead of primarily becoming a bloc associated with frustration and disenfranchisement. That means building think tanks, policy organizations, mentorships, pipelines, recruitment systems, and advocacy groups specifically centered around black male advancement. It means creating serious policy proposals instead of only reacting emotionally after decisions are already made. It's like you sitting there waiting for the Democrats to do so instead of empowering the Democratic Party to go your way to do what you want them to do. You want to sit on the sideline and say they ain't did nothing for me, but there ain't nobody joining no kind of coalitions, putting money together, joining local communities, councils, committees, all of those things. It means demanding measurable outcomes. They should be demanding measurable outcomes and refusing to settle for symbolic gestures alone. Most importantly, it means understanding that politics is not about whether a party loves you emotionally. Politics is about whether you have enough organized leverage to force your priorities onto the agenda. Have you black men put a priority? Have you put your agenda together and forced it onto the Democrats to make it a priority? Have you done that? Have you ever done that? Instead of sitting back and waiting for them to say, oh, the black man voted for me, I think we should do something for the black people. No, you have to be organized and strategic as a black man, as a black group, to get things done that are priorities for you. You are in this group. They prioritize the things that you put forward. If you put forward certain things, they will prioritize those things if you're loud enough. Why do you think things that black women put forward all the time are prioritized? Because we are loud with the things that we want. You as black men have to become loud with the things that you want. That's not meaning that you become blind loyalists to the Democrats. What they need to do is become politically unignorable. That is how frustration gets transformed into power instead of self-destruction. Now, don't confuse frustration with surrender. I understand why black men feel abandoned politically, because a lot of the frustration comes from real experiences, real disappointments, real instability. Many black men feel economically exhausted, politically invisible. I get that. Culturally dismissed. Okay. What concerns me is that some people are becoming so frustrated that they're beginning to lose long-term political clarity. Black Americans cannot afford political confusion during periods of major institution transformation like this administration is doing. You do not have to worship Democrats in order to recognize what's happening when political leverage weakens, like losing the Voting Act, losing the Civil Rights Acts, DEI, losing all of those things. This is called institutional transformation. And when things become politically weakened for the black community, you do not have to worship the Democrats in order to recognize what happens when this shit happens, when shit gets shifted away from black priorities or black people or black interest. People should absolutely pressure the Democrats harder. You should have an agenda as black men. You should have some kind of agenda and to push the Democratic Party where you want them to go. That Democratic Party has only been the only vehicle that has forwarded the black agenda. It's the only vehicle that we have been able to use to forward the black agenda. Why would you abandon the only thing that has helped us move forward in this country? Okay. People should absolutely pressure the Democrats. Like I said, they should demand better outcomes, stronger accountability, more serious engagement with black communities. I get all that too. However, there's a major difference between holding a political party accountable and emotionally drifting towards political decisions that may ultimately weaken black leverage or hurt black people, like going over to the Republican Party will do. Politics is not about who who fled his frustration more effectively during one election cycle. I get all that. Politics is about who shapes the institutions, the protections, the courts, the schools, labor systems, and the economic structures that future generations will inherit and we can build upon. My generation built and fought for the civil rights acts, for DEI and affirmative action. And in 40 years, 60 years, that shit came crumbling down because this younger generation said, oh, it ain't no big deal to have none of that. And instantly, once this president got into office, he started dismantling things that were related to black people. People say, oh, he's not racist. No, he ain't. He don't do them kind of thing. He ain't racist. If everything that you touch is related to dismantling black structure or degrading black power structures, then something tells me that you're a little bit racist. Just does. I think some black men are angry enough to walk away emotionally without fully understanding what may exist on the other side of that decision long term. That's a conversation people keep avoiding. You keep saying, what have the Democrats done for me? What the hell has the Republicans done or promised to do? Nothing at all. And they don't intend to do anything. They intend to do exactly what they've been doing, dismantling black protections, weakening black structures. And that's as far as I can see. If you want your priorities to be in the Democratic Party, you need to put a coalition together. You need to put some priorities together and present those to the Democratic Party so that we can put you as a priority. Democratic Party, we have many coalitions in this Democratic Party. Okay. One year, my priorities may be the forefront. Last year, the LGBT may be in the forefront. The next year, children may be in the forefront. The year after that, black men may be in a priority. But you have to make your priorities and your disgruntledness what you need to make the Democratic Party aware of the frustration that you have. You just can't figure out that they're going to figure it out. They don't have ESP. The ESP button is broke. So if you like my content and you like this commentary and my presentation, please hit the like, share, and subscribe. I appreciate it. I appreciate the likes, the shares, the subscribe. Subscribe. They got to communicate. We got a big tent. Democrats have a big tent. And you just sitting back and saying the Democrats are not doing anything for me, but you're sitting in a corner. If you sitting in a corner and I jump up and get in front of you and say, hey, me, help me. They got a lot of shit on their plate. They're going to help these people. You need to jump up and wave your hand. As black men, you need to jump up and raise your, but that's the way it is, Black America. You don't want a big tent. You want to be a Republican. That's where you need to go. Because if you ain't a Democrat, I don't think you're a Democrat. You don't know that you're a Republican. You don't know that you're a Republican. Because a Democrat would understand exactly what I'm saying. They would understand. But you came back with, we don't want a big tent. That makes no sense whatsoever. But if you like my commentary, please put the like, share, and subscribe in the comment section. And I will see you in the next video. Please and thank you. Okay. Yes. Stop believing. Read your history. Start reading your history, man. Start reading your history. Because a lot of y'all act like y'all don't understand the history. Those people who got the Civil Rights Act, the DEI, and the affirmative action, they put that stuff in place to help future generations. And all of that got dismantled under this president. And it seems to be okay with you guys. All of this weakened protection seems to be okay. Nobody has a word to say. And then now we have people talking about, let's go over to the Republican Party. Are you crazy? when he's dismantling everything that's black. He's dismantling everything that helps black progress. The Smithsonian, Tuskegee Institute, Barack Obama's legacy, trying to destroy all that. Stop it. No, the Republican Party, this Republican Party that's in office is not for a black person at all. Okay. I don't know what kind of history you got, Black America, but you act like you don't understand your history. You act like you don't understand it. I don't get it. You act like you don't understand. But I don't know. But I will see you guys in the next video. I appreciate, please like, share, and subscribe. I appreciate all of you guys. I appreciate all of you guys. I really do.